Hello and welcome. I'm Raghav and welcome to this part of Katalon Studio Masterclass. I hope all of you are doing awesome. In this session, I will go very basic step by step and we will learn from scratch the next topics on Katalon Studio, and you can follow me on Windows or Mac operating system. And if you are running command line, you can also follow and run the commands on a Linux operating system. So just to give you a very quick recap on what we have covered in the earlier sessions in the earlier masterclass. We started with Katalon Studio. We looked at what is the platform, why do we use it, and then we started with download and setup. We got the platform, we downloaded it on Windows and Mac operating system. We looked at the features and functionalities and the GUI of the tool. We looked at different parts of the platform. And then we started with web UI automation testing. We learned how do we create a project and then how do we create tests in Katalon Studio. And then we looked at the three different modes of test creation, that is the recording mode, the manual mode, and the script mode. How do we create tests in all these three modes? We also learned about test cases, test suite collections. How do we create them and how do we use them? We then moved to logs and reports. How do we see the logs? What are the different options? And then what are the different formats of reporting? How do we get the reports? We then learned about custom keywords. What are custom keywords? How do we create them? How do we use them in our test cases? We learned about execution environments. What are execution environments or execution profiles? How do we use them? How do we create them? And using this, how can we make our tests run on multiple environments like a QA environment, a regression environment, a sandbox, etc., without doing any manual intervention in our test cases or our test data. And then we looked at Katalon Recorder, the extension, the browser extension. We also looked at how to use it, how to get it and use it. And then we discussed why exactly we need this extension for Katalon Studio. Then we learned how can we record and spy objects on our primary system browser, that is our desktop browsers. We looked at variables. What are variables? The three different types of variables in Katalon Studio. How do we use it? How do we create and use these variables? Then we learned about data-driven testing. How can we use test data from external sources like an Excel file or a CSV file or a database or internal data? And how can we run our test cases with this data? And then we discussed and learned about checkpoints. What are checkpoints? How do we create and run checkpoints? And then we learned command line execution. How can we generate commands for our test execution and how do we run them? So this is what we have done in the earlier sessions, in the earlier masterclass. Today, we will start with failure handling. What is failure handling? How do we manage and control failure handling in Katalon Studio? We will look at listeners. What are listeners? How do we create and run listeners? We will see how do we create setup and tear down scripts. We will learn a very interesting concept called self-healing. So a lot of times in automation, it happens that whenever there are some changes in the application from the backend, sometimes when we get a new release and there are some changes in the object locators, our existing object locators sometimes break and it causes a lot of failures in our automation tests. So in Katalon Studio, there is one very interesting feature called as self-healing, which can actually self-heal the objects or the locators, and it uses artificial intelligence. And I will show you how exactly this works. We will learn how do we handle frames in Katalon Studio, and we will also see another interesting concept called visual validation. So generally, we do functional testing. Functional testing is checking or testing the functionality or a user scenario. For example, for a login scenario, we will check that when we enter a valid username, a valid password, and click on the login button, we should get navigated to the home page. So this is a normal functionality check. However, with visual validation, we can also check and verify the look and feel of the web page in terms of the sizes of the objects, the shapes, the location, the colors, the pixels, etc. So this is going to be very interesting. I will show you exactly how Katalon Studio does it. There are some integrations with third-party tools, and I will show you how to do that. Then we will learn about some tips on debugging and troubleshooting. How can we debug and troubleshoot in case of failures? And then finally, we will see how do we integrate with source code management tools like Git. How can we put our project on a cloud repository like GitHub? How can we share with team, and how can we do commit and push? So all this we are going to learn step by step from basics. So I hope this will be very interesting. Let's get started with failure handling. And here we will learn how do we do failure handling in Katalon Studio, and we will see the default failure handling and stepwise failure handling. So let's go to Katalon Studio. I have my Katalon Studio opened here. And here, this is the same project I will be using, although these are all new topics. So even if you want to continue on a new project, that is fine. So if you go to project settings, test design, test case, you will see the option for failure handling. So I will go to project settings, and I will go to test design and test case. So you can see the failure handling here, and by default, it is stop on failure. And then we also have other options. We can make it continue on failure, or even can make it optional. Let me give you an example. I will create a new test. I'm just going to create a new test case. And I will call it failure handling demo. And description and tags are optional. I'll just say okay here. And I have got the failure handling demo test case here. And it will open the test case editor here. And for this test case, I will very quickly do a recording. So I will go here to record web, and it will open the web recorder window. And I will go to this website, Orange HRM. You can use any demo website. This is a demo site, so sometimes it can be down, or sometimes the credentials won't work. In this website, the credentials are admin and admin123. So this is what I'm going to use. So here, I will give the URL here and click on record. So it records open browser. It will open the browser. And now I will do my recording. I will enter the username, which is admin. I will enter the password admin123 and click on login. And here I'll just click on this welcome link, and I will click on log out. And all these steps are recorded here. And finally, I will stop recording. When I will click on stop recording, it will close the browser, and it will also record the close browser action. So all this is done. I will click on save script, and I will just save all the objects. Also, if you remember in the earlier session, I told you that in this particular version, so if you see the version I'm using is 8.3.5. In this particular version, there is a issue that if you try saving the objects which are already present, so these are highlighted here, and here it is said that the highlighted objects already exist in object repository, and we have to choose one of the actions. Do we want to merge the changes to existing objects? Do we want to create duplicate objects, or do we want to replace existing objects? Now, if you normally we can go with merge changes, but this creates duplicate attributes in that object, and then it will throw some error. So therefore, I am continuing with replace existing objects. And it is only when you have the objects already existing. Otherwise, you will not have to do this. I'll just say okay. And I have got my test created. And just to verify, I will quickly save and run and check everything is working fine. So this will start the browser and goes to the application, enters username, enters password, clicks on login, clicks on welcome, and logs out, and everything is working fine. Now let's just say I will add a step here somewhere in between. Let's say after click on submit button, I'm adding a web UI keyword, and I'm saying verify text present. So this is the keyword I'm using, verify text present. And here I have to give the text value that I want to verify. So here I'm saying I want to check ABC 1, 2, 3 on the web page, and this will not be present. So this should fail. So let us check. I will run it again and let us see the execution. I can also check the log viewer. So here it enters username, enters password, clicks on login, and you can see it could not find the text ABC123. You can see in the logs, it says text ABC123 is not present on the page. If I go to the tree view, here also you can see verify text present is failed because this text is not present on the page. And if you notice, as soon as the step fails, it has stopped the recording. The execution is stopped, and it does not continue with the rest of the steps. And this is because the failure handling, which is set for our project, if I go back to project settings and test design and test case, the failure handling set is stop on failure. And that is why whenever there is a failure, the execution stops. But if I do not want the execution to stop, I want it to continue, then I will make it continue on failure. And I will now run the test again, and let us see what happens this time. So it opens the browser, goes to the application, logs in, and that step failed. But if you notice here, this step has failed, but still it continued with the rest of the steps and it has completed the test. So this is now because we have changed the failure handling. And here, if you see, it has continued on failure. However, the test will be marked as failure because even a single step fails, the test will be marked as a failure. Now, if you do not want this, let's say this is a very trivial step and I do not want that in case this step fails, it should not mark the test as failure. In that case, I can go back to project settings and go to test design, test case, and I will make the failure handling as optional. So this time, the failure handling is optional. That means even if the step fails, it will continue and the failed step will not impact the overall result of the test case. So let's see, we have completed the test and you can see this time, this is marked as a warning and not as a failure. If I see the tabular view of the logs, you can see the test is marked as pass here. If I see the tabular view, again, you can see this step where we have a failed step, it is marked as a warning and not as a failure, and the overall status of the test case is pass. So this is how you can do failure handling. Also, you can see this icon changes as we change the failure handling. Now, generally, so this is all fine, and this is how you can do failure handling. However, if you try to change failure handling at a global level, that is at a project level from project settings, it will be applicable to every test case and every test step of the project, which is something we may not want. We generally would want to keep the failure handling as stop on failure at a global level, at a project level, and maybe some steps which we want that these should be marked as optional or maybe marked as continue on failure. We can specifically mark those test cases for failure handling. So we can do that. Let me show you. I will go back to my project settings and I will go to test design and test case. And here at a project level, I will keep it as stop on failure. And you can see all these icons are also changed. And only for the step where I want, I can do a right click and I can change the failure handling from here. So we can make it continue on failure or optional. So I'll just make it optional here. And you can see the icon also has changed here. And now this particular step is optional, but others are stop on failure. If I go to the script view of the test case, you will see the change here as well. So you can see for this particular step, the failure handling is changed to optional. Okay, so this is how we can do failure handling in Katalon Studio. Let's move to the next topic. The next is listeners. We will learn what are listeners, how to create listeners, and how to create setup and tear down functions. So listeners are functions that can run before or after a test case. So generally, we may want sometimes we may want to run some functions or actions before and after the actual test case. For example, we may want to do some kind of a data setup before running the actual test case. We may want to do some changes in the database. We may want to run some SQL queries. We may want to start some drivers. And similarly, after the end of the test case, we may want to close all the database connections or close all the drivers, or maybe we may want to revert the test data to its original position or its original state. So all these things which we may want to do as a prerequisite or as a tear down, and these steps are not the part of the actual test case, the actual functionality that we want to test. We can create these functions which are called as setup and tear down. Setup means something that will run before a test case or a test suite. Tear down means something which will run after a test case or a test suite. So we have this functionality in listeners, and this concept is if you have learned about Selenium and TestNG, there also we have this concept of listeners, and then there we have a lot of events, listeners listening to a lot of events like a start event, a stop event, a failed event, a pass event, a skipped event, and so on. So here in Katalon Studio, I'll show you the options we have. So we can have listeners which are actually functions that can run before and after a test case or before and after a test suite. So we have setup and tear down functions. Let us look at the steps. So we will go to the test explorer, and you will find a folder called test listeners. And here we can create a new listener. So let me go here. Also, just to mention, the version I'm using for Katalon Studio is 8.3.5. This is the latest version as per this time. And I'm using the trial version. So I have the Katalon Studio Enterprise trial. Now I'll go to my test explorer, and here you will find a folder called test listeners. I'll go here, do a right click, say new test listener, and you can give any name. I will say test listener 1, and there is an option to generate some sample before and after methods. So just in case you want to see some samples, you can check these. As of now, I will keep all these unchecked and click on OK. And you will see it actually creates a Groovy script. And here is a class. A class is created with the same name as we have given to our listener. And between these curly brackets, the start and the end curly bracket of the class, between these, we can create functions, and then we can make these functions as listeners, that is setup and tear down methods. I can collapse all these import statements. Also, if you want to increase or decrease the font, you can press Control+ on your keyboard or Control- to decrease the font. In case you are on Mac, you can use Command+ and Command-. So here we have done step number 2. We will now add functions for setup and tear down. So here in Groovy, we say to create a function, we say def, this is a keyword, and I can create a function called before test. Now this function name can be anything. I'm creating the before test just for easy understanding. So don't worry about this. It can be 1, 2, 3, ABC, anything. This will not impact the sequence of execution. I'll say before test case, and we give bracket start and stop, and then a curly bracket start and stop. So this curly bracket, between these curly brackets, we can write our function body. So in this function, I'm just saying I will print I am inside before test case function, or I'll just say I am inside before test case. Similarly, I can create one more method after test case. And here I will say I'm inside after test case. I can just double click here to expand this so we can see a full screen. Then I will create a function before test suite, and I will say I'll print here I am inside before test suite. So the reason I'm doing this is when we run our test, we can actually check in the logs or the console that these statements are printed. And similarly, I will create one more function, which is after test suite. And here I will say I'm inside after test suite. Okay, so we have got these 4 functions created: before test case, after test case, before test suite, and after test suite. Now, as of now, these are simple groovy functions. These are not yet listeners, and this will not get executed before or after test cases or test suites. As of now, these are simple functions. These are not listeners. To make them as listeners, we will have to add some annotations just at the top of the function. So let us say this function I want to run before running a test case in this project. So I will go to the top of this function and I will say at, and I will say before test. And if you press Control space on your keyboard, you will get auto suggestions as well. So let me show you. If I press Control space, I can see these auto suggestions. And the one that you need is before test case, this one, which should be coming from com.kms.katalon.co.annotation. So you can click this one, double click, so that you don't make any mistakes in the spelling or the cases. So the cases are also important here. So now this function becomes a listener, and this will get executed before every test case in this project. And that is why I said that this name does not matter. It can be anything. This is the annotation that will matter, and this will make it run before test case. Similarly, for this function, after test case, I will add the annotation after test case. And for this one, I will say before test suite. And this I will say after test suite. So at this point, if I press Control space, it will autocomplete because it has matching a single option. So this is how we can create listener functions, and this is how my functions look like. Make sure that you save your project. So we have done this, we have saved, and now we can run and check how the listeners gets executed. So for that, just to check the sequence of execution, I'm going to create a new test case. And here I will call it as listeners demo. And in this test case, I will go to the script section and I will just print a statement. I will say println, I am inside the test case. So this will print this. So it will be very easy to see the sequence of execution. I will save and I will run this test, and let us check the log viewer. And this is done. So you can see in the log viewer, first it executes I'm inside before test case, then it executes I'm inside the test case, that is the actual test case, and then it executes I'm inside after test case. If I check the tree view, you can see here, it first executes before test case listener, then the actual test case, and then it executes the after test case listener. Okay, so this is how it will get executed. And if we execute a suite, it will also run the before and after test suite listeners. Let us try to do that. I will add this test case in a test suite. I'm going to create a new test suite. I will call this as test suite 2. And I will add this test case, that is listeners demo here. I will save and run, and I will check the log viewer. So this time we should also have the before and after test suite listeners getting executed. And yes, you can see it is first running before test suite listener, then it is running before test case listener, then the actual test case, and in the same sequence, it will run after test case, and then finally after test suite listeners. So this is how we can create and use listeners. Now, the examples I have shown you are kind of just dummy statements that we have printed inside these functions. In real world, you can do as per your requirement. If you have something to run or set up before test case or a test suite, you can add these in functions and annotate these with before test case or before test suite functions, before test case and before test suite annotations. If you have something to be run or done after a test case or after a test suite, you can accordingly add them in the functions and give the annotations. So these are listeners. Now, some important things about listeners. There is no limit on the creation of test listeners. You can create as many test listeners as you want. So for example, if I want to create more test listeners, I can go here and I can keep on adding more more listeners here. So there is no limit. There is no capping on that. However, if you have more than one test listeners, then the execution will happen in alphabetical order. Okay. So in that case, alphabetical order will be preferred, and the execution status of any steps within test listeners will not affect the overall status of the test case. For example, if you have some function, some steps in your setup or tear down before or after test case or test suite functions, and if something fails there, it will not impact the status of the test case. If the test case, the steps of the test case are pass, then it will be marked as pass. Okay, so this is about test listeners. Now, one thing that you may have noticed here is the test listeners work at a project level. That means if you create any test listener, any before or after test case, before or after test suite functions in a test listeners, these will be applicable to every test case and every test suite of your project. And this is sometimes not required. We may want to run some specific setup and tear down for some specific test case or some specific test suite. There will be very rare scenarios when we may want to run something for each and every test case and every test suite of our project. And this was realized by the Katalon team. So in the very next version, when these test listeners were introduced and released, in the very next version, there was a feature released called as setup and tear down, which can be created. The setup and tear down functions can be created for specific test suite. So we can do this at a suite level. So let us look at this. What is setup and tear down, and how do we use setup and tear down for test suite? So you can go to any of your test suite and go to the script tab. So let me go to this test suite that we just created. I will go to the test suites and I will go to this test suite. So you can go to any test suite of your project and you will see this script section here or a script tab. I will go here. I'll go to the script tab and here, let me expand this and I will press Control- so that you can see more code here. So you will see in any of the script tabs, there are some functions already created and which also have some annotations like add setup, add teardown, add setup test case, and add teardown test case. So these are the functions, these are the setup and teardown functions that will run only for this particular test suite. Now, you may wonder why these are not yet executed because these are already present here. So if you see, there is a skipped property which is marked as true for all these functions. And if you want these functions to get executed, you have to change the skipped to false. So let us do that. I will change all these skipped equals true to skipped equals false so that these will get executed. And I will also add the code. So as of now, these are empty functions without any code. So let me just say println. I am inside. This is suite teardown. So you can see add setup and add teardown is for test suite, and add setup test case and add teardown test case is for test case. So let me also copy this for other functions. So this is for suite setup. This one is for test case setup. And here, test case teardown. And you can see a lot of comments are here. So just in case you want to clean your code, if you want, you can remove these comments. So I'm removing these just so that the code looks a little cleaner and you can understand it properly. Otherwise, comments are very useful. You must have comments in your codes and functions so that others can also understand what exactly is there in your code and function. So just for making it more cleaner, I am removing all these comments. Okay. Also, at the bottom of this script, you can see there is a link, the Groovy tutorial page. Just in case you want to learn some Groovy, this is a good reference. So you can also check this. As of now, I'm removing all of this. And this is how our setup and teardown script for a test suite looks like. Okay. Now, if I try to run this, so we have added all these. If I try to run this particular test suite, we already have our test listeners created. So what will happen? What will be the sequence of execution? Let us check that. I will just run this test suite and look at the log viewer. So if you see the sequence, it will first execute the before test suite from the test listener. Then it executes the test suite setup, which is coming from the test suite setup script. Then it will run the before test case coming from the listener. Then the setup test case coming from the test suite test case setup function. And then the actual test case here. And in the same sequence, we will have teardown. So you can see this is teardown test case. Then this is after test case coming from the listener. And similarly, this is after test suite. This is Teardown test suite coming from the suite and Teardown test suite coming from the listener. So that means test listeners have higher preference. In case you have test listeners and the suite setup and Teardown both added in the project, the test listeners will have a higher preference. They will get executed first. And this is how you can create setup and Teardown. So generally, most of the times you may want to create setup and Teardown at test suite level and not at a global level. In case you want to run something before every test case or every test suite in your project, then you can always use test listeners. Okay, so this is how we can use setup and Teardown. Okay, next we have a very interesting topic, that is self-healing. And a lot of times during automation testing, you will face a scenario where you get a new build of the application, you get a new release, and in that new build or in that new release, there are some object locators which have got changed. Some object locators change, and they will not match with the object locators you have created while you were creating your test cases with the earlier version or the earlier build of the application. So this can happen frequently, that the object locators may change, or the object locators you have in your object repositories may not work. And in that case, there will be a lot of failures. And this happens very frequently in automation testing, that there are failures because the locators we are using are not able to identify or locate the objects on the web page. Objects can be anything like a text box, a button, a link, anything can be an object on a web page. So in Katalon Studio, there is a very interesting feature called as self-healing. Now, self-healing was earlier introduced as a plugin, which was a smart XPath plugin in version 7. And we had to add the plugin to Katalon Studio, and then we can work on it. But now, since few versions, we have Katalon Studio already added. We have the plugin, that is Smart XPath, already added. So starting from version 7, there was a mistake I did. It was not from version 7 that we had this plugin. This was already there. Before version 7, it was a separate plugin which had to be added into Katalon Studio manually, and then you could use it. But after version 7, or starting with version 7, we have this inbuilt in Katalon Studio. So here, if you go to your Katalon Studio, let me show you. I'm just going to close all this. So you will see this icon here. So this is self-healing. You can see it here, this icon. This is for self-healing. And if you click here, you can see the options. Do you want to disable self-healing? By default, it is enabled. You can disable it. You can open self-healing settings. You can open self-healing inside. So I will show you all this. So if you're using Katalon Studio version prior to 7, you will have to get the XPath, the Smart XPath plugin. However, I believe we have reached many releases after we had many releases, many new releases after version 7. So mostly you must be using a Katalon Studio version after version 7. So we can continue with this. We can continue with step number 2. So let's see how exactly we can make use of this Smart XPath plugin for self-healing. I will create a new test case. I can use any existing test case as well, but let me just create a new one so that I preserve all the earlier test cases as it is. I will call it as self-healing demo. And for this, I'm going to record a very quick test. And this time, let me just use the demo application from Katalon, which is Katalon-demo-Cura. So this is what I'm using. And I will click on record. I will click on make appointment. I will add the username and the password, I can just copy the password and click on login. So all these steps are recorded, and let me just stop it here. I'll just say after login, I should be able to see this, any of these. So I'll just do a right click here and say Katalon Studio, verify element present. And I will stop the recording and save the scripts. So I have got this test created. Now, the first thing I will do is I will first disable self-healing. So I can go here and I will click on disable self-healing. So I want to see what happens when self-healing is disabled. So I will disable it from here. You can again check if you see enable self-healing, that means it is already disabled. So now I want to break any of these locators. So let us say I will go to this login button. I will go to the object repository, and here is this object login button, and I will make some changes in the locator. So I'm saying this is btn login 123, which is an invalid locator. This should fail. I will save. Also make sure I will go to project settings and I will go to execution, and I will reduce the default wait timeout to 5 seconds. By default, it is 30 seconds. I am reducing it so that we do not have to wait for a long time before the failure happens. So I have done this, and I will now save and run the test case, and let us see what happens. So it will open the browser, goes to the application, enters username, password, and now it is trying to click on the login button. And it did not find the login button. It failed. If you check the logs, you can see here it says it was not able to find the object by this particular ID or locator, btn login 123. By this XPath, it was not able to find it. Now let us enable self-healing. I will click here and say enable self-healing, and I will run the test again. I'll click on run, and let us see what happens now. So it opens the browser, goes to the application, enters username, enters password, and now the self-healing will start its work. It will try to locate the object, and you can see it found the login button and it continued with the test case, and the test case is now pass. And if you look at the logs, so here, this was the button, this was the object that we were trying to find. And you can see it says unable to find the element by this locator. And then the self-healing started working, and it found that this is a working locator. Therefore, it continued with the test and it made it work, and we did not had any failure. If I go to the console, the same things you can see at this particular step, when it was unable to find or locate the element by this particular XPath or locator, the self-healing started working, and then it finally found that it works, this particular locator works, and then it used this to do the action on the object. Now, we have done step number 2, 3, and we have checked this. Now, we will check the self-healing insights, and you can see it is already here, or you can go here and click on open self-healing insights. So whenever any self-healing takes place, we get an entry here in the self-healing insights. So it says for this particular object, this locator was broken, and the self-healing proposes this locator which is working, and it is on the user to approve or discard this change. So it will not make any changes in your project, in your object repository without your approval. It will just tell you that I have found that this locator was broken, and this locator, what is working and what is proposed is here. And if you want to approve it, you can click on approve, and it will go from here. And if you now go to the object repository for button login, and if you refresh it, you will see it is now updated here. Okay, it also says one broken test object recovered. So this is how self-healing works. And actually, if you check, whenever Katalon Studio, whenever you record or you spy object, Katalon Studio, along with finding the primary locator, it also finds a lot of other locators using the neighbors, using the position. And this is what helps when self-healing works. So if this primary locator fails, it will check for all these options using the position, relative position, neighbors of the element, and will try to locate or anchor that particular element. And if it finds it, it will take the action, and in the self-healing insights, it will give you the, it will tell you that what has happened, what was broken, what is proposed, and then you can approve or discard the change. So this is how self-healing works. And we have done all this. You can also go to the self-healing settings. So I can go to self-healing and I can say open self-healing settings. This actually takes us to project settings and self-healing. And here we have options to enable or disable self-healing from here. We also have options to prioritize element locator methods. So when self-healing works, what methods do you want to use first? So you can drag and drop these and you can set the priority. So by default, XPath is at the top priority, then we have attributes, then CSS, and then images. Also, if you want to exclude some particular keywords from self-healing, you can add these keywords here. For example, verify element present, verify element not present. We don't want self-healing to work here in general. So we have added this. You can, if you want, you can remove, or if you want, you can add more keywords here. So if you click on add, you can just, add these here. Okay, so this is how. Let me just change this to verify element present and apply and close. Okay. Okay, so this is how self-healing works, and this is very interesting. Now, although this is a great feature and it can help you to minimize your failures during execution in case there are any changes from the backend, in case the object locators do not work, it can help you a lot. However, still some teams, some users do not want to use it. While teaching Katalon Studio to some organizations and while taking some corporate trainings, I came across some teams who did not like that without their knowledge, there should not be any changes in the script. Even during execution, there should not be anything happening without their knowledge. Although self-healing works during execution, and after execution, you can check the self-healing insights and see what was broken, what was proposed, and then you have the control to discard or approve the change. But still some teams do not want to do that, and in that case there is one other feature, a very important feature called time capsule. So time capsule will not make any changes during execution. If something is failed, it will be failed, but then you can go back in time, you can bring up the page of your application where exactly the failure happened, where exactly the object was broken, and then you will have the option to check your locators, you will have the options to find or spy new locators, and then you can make the changes. So just in case you want to look at a demo of time capsule, you can say, you can search for Katalon Studio time capsule by my name. I had created a video. Yes, it is here. So this one from automation step-by-step channel, you can learn how exactly you can use time capsule. Okay. So this was self-healing. Let us move to the next topic, which is frames handling. Okay, so in this topic, frames handling, we will learn how can we work with objects inside frames? So you might have seen there are some applications where you will find frames. Frame is a window within a browser, and frames can be used to show some third-party applications, or you might have seen some websites where they show third-party advertisements, and these advertisements are shown in a window, which is usually a frame. So let me show you. Let me just give this example. If I go to this link, you can see there are 3 frames here. This is frame number 1, frame number 2, and frame number 3 here. And one of the ways to find out if it is a frame or not, if you do a right click here, if you see this, these options like reload frame, view frame source, that means it is a frame. Also, if you go to inspect, you will see iframes tags here. So you can see something like iframe here. This is a frame. This is the name of the frame, the title, and so on. So you can see these are all frames here. So this is how you can find out if it is a frame. And then in automation, if you have to access any object like these links which are inside the frame, you cannot do it directly. So you will have to use keywords like switch to frame, and then you can access the objects. And once you want, you have done your work with those objects and you want to come out of the frame, you will have to use the keyword switch to default content. If you go to Katalon Studio and go to keywords browser, go to built-in keywords, web UI keywords, you will see there is a folder for frames. And if you expand it, you will see these 2 keywords, switch to frame and switch to default content. Okay, now let us see a demo. I will create a new test case. I'll just go to my test cases folder, create a new test case, and I will call it as frames demo. And here I will do a recording. I will click on record web and I will go to this link and I'll click on record. So you can see we have got this web page, and although you can see while recording, I'm able to access all these objects or all these links which are inside the frame. But what happens when I record and run this test case? Let us first try to record. I will click on this link, which is inside a frame. If I see all this is getting recorded, I will click on this link. Again, it is inside a frame. I will click here. It is again inside a frame. And then finally, I will stop recording and I will save the script and the objects. Okay, so I have done step number 1. Step number 2, we have used this particular link, and I will now save and run. So I will save and run the test case, and let us see if it passes or if there are any failures. So it opens the browser, goes to the application, and yes, it is able to click on the links and everything is fine. You can see the logs. It was able to access all the links inside the frame. So how did this happen? Let us check the objects. I will go to the object repository and let us see these objects. So these are the objects which got recorded. And if you see, these are the actual objects, that is the link. And these objects have a parent iframe. And this parent is also recorded. So if I browse, you can see this is also recorded here. This is here within the object repository. So Katalon Studio, if it finds the object is inside a frame, it will record the frame, or it will capture the frame object as well. So you can see here it has recorded the frame where it says name of the frame is package list frame. This is the XPath. And then for the object, it makes this as a parent. So if we do this, then we do not have to use the keywords, that is switch to frame and then switch to default content. It will take care of the frames. It will know that this object is inside this frame. So it will first go inside the frame and then it will click on the object. So therefore, in Katalon Studio, we do not have to manually use these keywords. But just in case, sometimes if this does not work, if the if the automatic way does not work, you can either use these keywords, or you can just make, you can capture the frame object and make the frame as the parent of that object that you want to access. So this is how it will work in Katalon Studio. Okay, now let us look at visual validation. Now this is a very interesting topic. So how we can actually visually check or validate our websites or web pages. Visual validation means that we can check the look and feel, we can verify the location of the objects, the size, the color, the pixel, all this we can verify, and we can actually compare it against a baseline. And if there are any differences in the location, pixels, size, color, etc., it will tell us where exactly the change is. And this can be very handy and very useful. So let us see how exactly we can do visual validation with Katalon Studio. So for this, we use a tool, a platform called Applitools. And here we can, using this platform, we can check web pages for their design, size, color, pixel, location, etc. Let us see the steps. First, we will go to applitools.com and we'll create a free account. So I'll go to applitools.com. And here you can click on Get Started to create a free account. And you can give all your details here, create a password. You may get an email for verification, and then you can sign in. I will sign in. I already have an account. So I am signing into my account. Okay, so this is, I have signed in, and once you create your account, you can sign into here. And here I'm in my test results page. As of now, it is empty. And now we will go to the next step. So if you are using Katalon Studio version 7.6 onwards, then you do not have to do step number 3 and 4, because Applitools now comes as a built-in plugin or a built-in feature in Katalon Studio Enterprise. So if you see here, this is my Katalon Studio and I am on an enterprise trial license. Here, if I go to project and go to settings and go to plugins, you will see this Applitools integration is already present here. So you do not have to get it separately if you are using Katalon Studio version 7.6 onwards. So you will not need to do step number 3 and 4. Let us continue with step number 5. We have to integrate our Katalon Studio with our Applitools account. And for that, we go to project settings, plugins, and Applitools. I'm already here. I went to my project settings, plugins, and Applitools integration. And now we will give the API key from the Applitools account. If you go to your Applitools account, you can go here and click on my API key, copy it from here, provide it here in Katalon Studio. You can give any application name if you want to. Match level, you can keep it as it is. There are different match levels that I will talk about later. And then this is the resolution or the grid view port that you want to check your web pages with. And we can give multiple resolutions. So as of now, I will say you give 2 square brackets and you give the resolution like this. I will say 800 by 600. So this is how we give it. And if you want more resolutions to be checked, you can give a comma and can give more like this, 1200 by 800 and so on. As of now, I will give a single one and later on we will check with more. And that's it. I will save the settings, apply and close. And now If I go to the keywords browser and expand the custom keywords folder, we will see some keywords from Applitools. So if I go to the keywords browser and go to custom keywords, general, you can see all these keywords are coming from Applitools, and this is what we will be using in our test case. So the next step is we have to record a test case, and we are using this demo app, which is coming from Applitools itself. You can use any other application if you want. Just to give you a demo, I will use this. So if I show you this application, it is applitools.com/hello world 2. And here you can see in this on this web page, we have some text. And if I click on diff1, here you can see nothing happens. But if I click on diff2, you can see here this click me button goes here. And then if I click here, you can see there is some change here and it shows me an image. If I go to diff1 and again say click me, you can see again there are this random text, dynamic value, and this image here. So let us create a test case. I will create a new test. I will say visual validation demo and say okay. And I will click on record web and give the application and start recording. Okay. So here I'll click on diff1. I can also expand and see the steps. Now, wherever you want to validate the page, that is, you want to do visual validation, you can add the keyword check window coming from Applitools. Now, you can do this after you have recorded the entire test case and after you have saved, or you can do this while recording as well. So let's say after this step, I want to add this keyword. So I will click here. Within the recording window, I will go to this add dropdown and say custom keywords. And if I scroll down, if I check, I think this is not the one. Let me remove this. I will say, yeah, it is here, custom keyword. And you can see this is check window that we need coming from Applitools. I will use this. And here I also have to give the input, that is the test name. So I will say this is test1 or check1, whatever you want to give it. And then I will continue recording. I will say, I'll click on diff2. And I will say, click me. Let me check if this is all getting recorded or not. So I will say, let me see, click me, and I will stop the recording. And looks like the steps I recorded after doing this manual intervention did not record. So let me just record it again. I will add the custom keywords separately. So I'm recording again. I will click on diff1. I'll click on diff2. And then I will click on this click me button. And then I will stop the recording. And I will save the script. And here, after I click on diff1, I want to add a custom keyword. So I will say add custom keyword, which is check window. And then after this step, after I clicked on the button, again, I will say add custom keyword, which is check window. And I have to give the test name. This I will call as test1. And this I will call as test2. And I will save my project. So we have added the Applitools keyword, and we have also added the test name for these steps. And now we will save and run and check the result on the Applitools dashboard. So just run it from Katalon Studio, save and run. And whenever there will be a Applitools keyword getting executed, you will see on your Applitools dashboard, you will see the results coming here. Make sure that you are on the test results here. So it is getting executed. And if you refresh it here, you will see test 1 is running as of now. And test 2 is also running as of now. Okay, I can see test 1 and test 2 here, although this is coming as unresolved and that test case is also shown as failure. I believe this is because I had earlier used test 1 and test 2 names on my Applitools. So let me just change these so that we have completely new tests, and it should not, it should consider it as a new test case. Let me use this. So I'm trying to give some unique names which might not have been used earlier on my Applitools account, and I will run the test again. Let us see this time. It opens the browser, goes to the application, clicks on diff1, and now you can see it has also changed the resolution to 800 by 600 as we have mentioned in our Applitools settings. If I check my Applitools dashboard and refresh, you can see test 1 is now getting executed. And now this is diff2. If I again refresh and check, test 2 is now getting executed here. And for the first run, both of these should be passed because this is the first run. There is no baseline to compare. The next run will have the baseline. So if I go to test 1, it shows as passed because there is no baseline image to compare it with. But the next time, this image will be used as a baseline. And the same thing for test 2. Let us now run the test again. And this time there will be some comparison and we will be able to see the exact results on Applitools dashboard. So every time, the first time, it will be the first image, there will be no baseline, so it will pass. And from the second run onwards, it will do the comparison. So let us see. So test 1 is running and we will have the results. And test 2 is running now. And on Katalon Studio, you can see it is shown as failure. And that is because this check window, there were some changes. So therefore it has failed. You can see it also says us that you can check the results here on Applitools. And if I go here, it says it has failed and you can check the results on Applitools. So let us see. Test 1 passed because there were no changes from the baseline image. So you can see this is the baseline image and this is the current image or the current web page, and there are no changes, therefore everything has passed. But if I look at test 2 and if I click on this image, you can see this is 800 by 600 and here you can see the differences. So these are the differences and therefore it has marked it as a failure. Now if you see here, it is shown as unresolved and not as a failure. And this is because sometimes this change can be a planned change. Therefore, the user has to make it pass or fail from here. So in case you believe this is a issue, this should not be different, then you can mark it as a failure. And if you may mark it as pass here, then this will be used as the baseline for the next run. So as of now, I'm just marking it as a failure. And you can now see it is marked as a failure and I will just save it. And now it is marked as a failure here. Now, also, sometimes on your web page, there may be some dynamic content, some timestamps, which will always change. In that case, you can ignore that region. You can see here, ignore. So whatever region you want to ignore, let's say this region may have some dynamic data or some timestamps, you can ignore that region, and that will not be taken into consideration while you are doing visual validation. Okay, so this is how you can do visual validation using Applitools and Katalon Studio. Okay. Next, we will look at debugging and troubleshooting. And in automation, when you run your tests, sometimes there are failures, and it will be very handy if you know how do you debug, how do you troubleshoot the issues, how do you troubleshoot the failures, and then if required, how do we debug, and we can go deep inside the failures and causes, and we can find out what actually is the reason for this failure, and then we can fix it. So let us see some tips on debugging and troubleshooting, how to debug tests, how to troubleshoot. So the first thing is we have to check the logs. Let us take some example. I will go to any of the existing test case. Let us say I'll go to failure handling demo test case that we created today. And here we had made this particular step as optional. Let me make it back, change the failure handling back to stop on failure. Okay, so that it will fail, and then we will check the logs, and I will save and run this. So this opens the browser, goes to the application, adds username, password, clicks on the login button, and now it will try to find the text which is not present, and it fails. So the first tip is we have to check the logs. So you can see here we have got the logs. In the logs, whenever there will be a failed step, it will be highlighted with this red cross mark. And then here you will see the root cause. It says this text is not present on the page, and you can see all the other logs here. So this will be very handy. Most of the times you will be able to find out the issue or the cause just by looking at the root cause in the logs. If you want, you can go to this tree view. You can disable the tree view and go to the tabular view. Here as well, you can see the failed steps. You can also do the filtering from here. You can click here and you can see what exactly is the failure. And you can always check all the details from the logs itself. In case the failure is because of an object, you can directly go to the object. So when you go to the tree view, and if the failure is due to an object, you will also have the link for the object here that will directly take you to the object repository. And you can check the object. For example, if you go to any of the object, you can see the object locators. You can see all the attributes of the objects. If you want to change the locator or the selection method, you can change it from here. So all that you can find from the logs. Now, in case you want to do some more debugging at a deeper level, you can again go to the logs. So let me go again to the logs. I will say window reset perspective, and let me check where are the logs here. Yeah, we have the log viewer here. Let me run this again and check. So I'm running the test case again so that I get the logs. And this has failed. And you can go to the logs here. And if you do a right click, we have got this option. So I'm doing a right click on this fail step, and we got this option. Go to this step in script view. If I click this, you can see it opens the script view of the test case, and this particular step is highlighted. Now I can create a breakpoint. I can go here to this blue margin and double click and you can see a breakpoint is created. So a breakpoint is whenever I run this in a debug mode, the execution will continue until this breakpoint, and then it will pause, and I will have the options to check the details, and then if I want, I can do manual step-by-step execution. Let me show you. I can create breakpoints at other places as well. So I have just created these breakpoints here. I have all these 3 breakpoints, and now I will go to this debug button. So you can see this is the run button that we normally use, but this time I will go to this debug, and here also you have all the options for browsers, or if you just click, it will run on the default browser. I will click here and it will start execution in a debug mode. And as soon as it reaches the first breakpoint, so you can see it has started the execution. It opened the browser, it navigated to the application, and then it encountered the first breakpoint. So it has paused, and now it says, do you want to open the debug perspective, which is this debug perspective here? I will say yes, switch. And you can see now the debug perspective is on. And in the debug mode, we see 3 windows. The first window is here, which is the test case in script view. Then we have the second window here, which shows us all the variables, the breakpoints. We have 3 breakpoints here, any expressions if we have. And then the third window is the console, where we can see the console output. So this is very handy. Now I can do step-by-step execution using these buttons. And in case I have any variable in my test case, I can see exactly what value does the variable hold. So it can be very handy. Sometimes we have variables and we do not know what exactly is the value they are having. In case they get some dynamic values during runtime, we can check the values here. As of now, I don't have any variables in this script. So I can do step-by-step execution now. So you can see this button which says step over. You can click this, or if you want, you can also press F6 on the keyboard. Let me split my screen so that you can see the application here. And this is the Katalon Studio. I will click on this step over, and it will go to the next step, and again pause. So you can see it has gone to the next step, which has entered the username, and it has paused again. I will again click on this step over, and it will execute the next step and again pause. I will again click on step over. So it has entered the password and it has paused. I click the step over again, and this will click on the login button. And then again, it will pause and wait for the user input. And now you can see it has logged in and paused here. And this is the step that we want to check. So if you want, you can manually check if the text is present, or if the failure is at some other, due to some other reason, maybe some object or some other thing. You can check if the objects are loaded, if the objects are present, if the elements are present, and all that manually. And then again, click on step over. And then you can verify if the failure is a valid failure, or if it is just because the website took some time to load, the object took some time to load. All those things you can check. And finally, you can stop it from here. And if you want, you can go back to the keyword perspective. And this is how you can do troubleshooting and debugging. So we have done all these steps. So most of the times, you will be able to get the issue just by looking at the logs. And in case you want to do some more troubleshooting and debugging, you can use breakpoints. You can go to the script view, add the breakpoints, and then run in a debug mode, as I have shown you. You can also change the log levels. So if you go to Katalon Studio and go to this, let me close all this. If you go to this include folder and config log.properties, you can see, you can, if you want to change the log level, we have trace, debug, all that you can do from here. As of now, it is all commented out. But if you want to change the levels of logging, you can change it from here. So this is how we can do debugging and troubleshooting. Let us go to the next topic, which is integration with Git or version control system or source code management system. You will see in Katalon Studio, there is a direct integration with Git. There is an icon here. Also, you can see all these options. You can, if in case it is disabled, you can go to Window, Katalon Studio Preferences, and go to Katalon and Git, and you can enable it from here. We can also set the connection timeout with the Git repository or the remote repositories here. So by default, it will be enabled, but if it is disabled, you can enable it from here. So we'll learn here how to integrate with Git, how do we clone, pull, commit, and push, how do we work with team collaborations using Git in Katalon Studio. Okay, so step number 1 is enable Git integration, which we have already done. And this is where you can do this from. And then we will create an account on github.com. So basically we have to create a remote repository. You can use GitHub or Bitbucket or any other remote repository. So I will go to github.com, and here you can, if you have an account, you can click on sign in and sign into your account, or you can click on sign up. If you go to sign up, you can give all the details it asks for, and then you can create your account. So you can give your email and then you can create some password, and it will ask you for a username. You have to give something which is not available. So it will keep on telling you if something is not available. You can, give all these details here. So you will have to do all this, and finally you will be able to create an account and sign in. So I have an account. I will sign into my account. So I'll sign into my account here. Okay, so I have logged into my account, and I have some earlier projects or repositories as well, but that is fine. You may see a empty dashboard, and that is all fine. We have created an account on github.com and signed into the account, and now we will create a new repository. So for that, you can click here, new, or you can go to this plus drop down and say new repository from here, and give a name to the repository. I will say this is Katalon Studio Training Project. And if it is available, it will show you a tick mark. Description is optional. You can keep it public or private, and then say create repository. And this will create the repository. This is your repository URL. You can get it from here, or this will also work. You can get it from here too. As of now, this is empty. We don't have anything inside this repository. Now we will go to Katalon Studio and go to Git and say share project. So we will say, now before you do this, you can check if you have got a .gitignore file. So if you remember, in the first session, in the first masterclass, when we created the project, we had an option to add .gitignore file. Let me show you again. When I go to File, New, Project, we see this option to generate a .gitignore file. So if you have this, it is fine. This is a .gitignore file. Otherwise, you can also just create a new file in your project and name it .gitignore. So if you want, you can manually go to your project folder. So this is my project folder. You can manually go to this folder. And here you can just create a text file or a notepad file and name it .gitignore. So what exactly is this file? So when you push your project or all your folders and data to remote repository or GitHub repository or any Git repository, there may be some folders, some files that you do not want to store on the remote repository. For example, they can be reports. Now reports, there can be so many reports in your project and you do not want to make your remote repository bulky by pushing all the reports there. There may be some settings or library files that you do not want to send to the remote repository. So all these files and folders that you do not want to push to the remote repository, you can give their names or location here. So by default, you will see all these are already added. So I will keep it as it is. And now I will go to this Git dropdown here and say share project. And it says share project successful. That means our project is now being tracked by Git. Okay. And also it has added some more options on .gitignore file, which is fine. So our project is now being tracked by Git. At this moment, if you now again go to this Git dropdown, you will see all these options enabled: commit, pull, fetch, etc. In case you manually go to your project folder, you will now see there is a hidden folder .git created here. In case you do not see this, you can go to view and say show hidden items. So that means our folder or project folder is now being tracked by Git. Next step is I will do commit and push. So I will go here and say commit. And this should show me all the changes. So I should see a tab for git commit and push. Let me refresh the project. And I'll again say git commit, or let me just do a project close and clean up, and I will start the project again. And here I will go back to git and I will say commit. Yes, now I have got this git staging tab. You can double click and expand it. So here you will see all the changes that are not yet staged or committed will be shown here in the unstaged changes window. And because this is the first commit, you can see all the changes that we have done in our project from start. Everything is here. I will select everything by pressing Ctrl A on my keyboard and drag and drop all these to the staged changes window. So we want to commit all this. And now you have to give some commit message. You can give some meaningful message. As of now, I will say my first commit. So this message will be shown on the GitHub repository. So you can actually say what exactly you are committing so that the other team members will also know what changes you have done. And then you can say commit and push. Now here you will get this window where you have to give the URI of the repository, which is this URL of your repository. You can take it from here or from here and paste it here. And you will see all this is auto populated, and you will have to give your username, that is your GitHub username, and password. Now this password is not your GitHub password. We have to use a access token, and for that you can go to your GitHub. So let me show you. I will open this in a new window. And here, if you go to your this user drop down on the top right and go to settings, and here you go to scroll down and go to developer settings. Here you can go to personal access tokens and you can create a new token here. So click on generate new token. You can give some name. I will say this is for Katalon Studio, and you can set the expiration here. And then you can check what all access or scopes you want to give. So for committing and pushing to your GitHub repository from a third-party platform like Katalon Studio, you should have access for repo. Then write packages I can give here, and should be fine. I think this should work. I will say generate token, and the token is generated. Make sure that you copy and save it somewhere, because you will not be able to get it again, see it again here when you navigate from this page. So this is what you will be giving here. And also you can check this option, store in secure store, and this will make ensure that you do not have to always manually enter your credentials. So I will say next. So this is my repository here, and here it will go to the branch master. If you want, you can give a new branch name, but that is fine. I will say next, and I will say finish. Okay. If you now go and refresh your repository on GitHub, you can see all the changes have come here. This commit was done 3 minutes ago. My first commit, we have got our entire project here. If I go to any of the folders, I'll go to test cases, demo test cases. You can see all the test cases are here. And this is, we have pushed our Katalon project to the remote repository. So we have done all these steps. We committed, we staged the changes, and then we pushed to the repository. Okay. And these are the steps to generate the access token that I have already shown you. Now, whenever you make any changes, you just have to commit and push, and every team member can use this project. So let us say if I create a new test case, let us say I will just create a new test case, demo git test case, and I'll just add something here. So I will save it. Now, whenever you make any changes, you will just go to Git dropdown, go to commit. In the Git staging window, you will see all your changes which are not yet committed. You can select whatever you want to commit and drag and drop to the staged changes. Give some meaningful message, added demo git test case, commit and push. And if you check on your repository, you will see this is now added here. So all the changes you can add like this. Okay. And suppose you want to share your project with your team, or if any new member comes in your team, now you just have to give them this link for your GitHub repository, the project repository of GitHub. So if I show you, this is my GitHub project repository. I just have to give this link, and the person will go to Katalon Studio, go to this Git dropdown and say clone project. The new team member should have account on GitHub, and just give the repository URL here and give the GitHub credentials and say next, and say what branch you want to get. As of now, we have a single branch called master, and go to next. And here it is asking you, where do you want to save? Where do you want to clone the project? Let me say I want to get it on my desktop. So I'll just create a new folder here. And this is where I want. So I will use this location here. I'll just browse. I want it here. and I will say finish. So you can see it says resource exception. Okay, let me check again. I will again say clone project. I'll give the repository URL here. Make sure that you have given the right credentials. I'll just get it on my desktop. I'll say finish, and yes, the project is now getting cloned. And you can see this is our clone project. You can also check from project and settings. So this is a new project. I can also check on my desktop. I have got this project cloned from GitHub, and all my project has come here. If I go back to Katalon Studio and go to project and settings, you can see this is a new project which has gone to this location. And if I see, my entire project has come here with all my test cases and everything. So this is how you can share your project with your team, and everyone can now work in collaboration. Whenever you make any changes, you just go to Git and go to commit, and then commit the changes, and everything will be here on your repository. So this is how we can do Git integration and do team collaboration using the SCM tools in Katalon Studio. Okay, now all these Git actions that we have done from Katalon Studio, you can also do these from command line separately from Katalon Studio. So even if you do not open Katalon Studio, you can still do all the Git commit push and everything from command line. Just in case you want to learn Git and GitHub from command line and all the things, you can go to my website, or there was a video I created. Let me try to find it. Git and GitHub hands-on. If you search for Git and GitHub hands-on, you will find this tutorial I created. Yeah, this is the one. This is the one I created for Git and GitHub hands-on for beginners. And if you go to my website, that is automationstepbystep.com, here also you can find all the tutorials on Katalon Studio and Git and GitHub. So here you can see we have all these here, and if you search for Git, you will see all the Git and GitHub tutorials here as well. So you can do this from command line as well. And with this, you can take the quiz. So I have quizzes. I will have all the links, all the notes in the description of this video. So this will take you to this quiz, and you can take this quiz and you can let me know your score in the comment section. And if you have any questions, any doubts, you can always let me know. I will try to answer you as soon as I can. I hope all these sessions, the masterclass on Katalon Studio, was very useful for you. If you have any questions, do let me know. Please do some hands-on and share your knowledge with everyone. I hope it was very useful. Thank you for watching, and never stop learning.